Welcome to 1844 Made Simple. When you read the Bible, one point comes through. There is a judgment or judgments. We find it over and over again in Scripture. Just look at these few texts and you tell me whether or not they talk about some kind of judgment, end-time judgment or judgments, a judgment by works as well. 2 Corinthians 5:10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether it good or bad. Revelation 22:12, and behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give everyone according to his work. 1 Peter 4:17, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. Matthew 12:36, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. And, powerful one, Ecclesiastes 12:14, for God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Now, folks, these are just a few of many, many texts that not only talk about judgment, but a judgment by works, a judgment about our lives, our idle words, a judgment on how we lived. But you know, that presents a problem, doesn't it? And that's because we're saved by grace, by faith, without the deeds of the law. I mean, after all, isn't that what the gospel is all about? I mean, come on. Who is going to stand when every secret thing, when every idle word will be brought in judgment? I'm in trouble for what I've done publicly, much less privately. So how then can we stand? How are we to reconcile the idea of judgment with the idea of grace? Now, folks, this is not, nor it has been, only a Seventh-day Adventist question. On the contrary, Christian literature through the centuries has wrestled with this issue, how to reconcile salvation by faith and judgment by works. Two doctrines clearly taught in the Bible. Evangelical literature is filled with their best theologians wrestling with this difficult question. But guess what? I believe that as Seventh-day Adventists, we have the key to help unlock the challenge presented here between judgment by works and salvation by faith. And it's found in our sanctuary message, and specifically this one verse. Vayomer Eli ad erev boker al panim ushlosh meot v'nitztak kodesh. You know it better as Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Or what we as Adventists call the pre-Advent judgment. I want you to imagine that you were a Jew living in the time of the wilderness wanderings, after the tabernacle had been built and the Jews had been worshiping the Lord there. Now, suppose, however, that your understanding of the ritual was limited only to the sacrifice of the animal in the courtyard. Suppose that was all you concentrated on at the expense of the rest of the ministry, including, even especially, the work of the priest in the most holy place on the Day of Atonement. Now, let me ask you a question. Who would have a better understanding of the entire plan of salvation? The one whose focus began and ended with the sacrifice in the courtyard? Or the one who embraced the entire ritual, beginning with the sacrifice, but also understood the ministry of the high priest on the Day of Atonement? Well, of course, the answer is obvious. The answer is obvious that the one whose understanding embraced the entire sanctuary would have a better understanding than the one who focused only on the death of the animal. In fact, I would say that the one who understands the entire sanctuary service would have a better understanding of the death of the animal and what it meant than one whose understanding was limited only to the death of the animal itself. And that is because the death of the animal was part of a larger picture. And to limit yourself to that would mean to miss the big picture. Suppose, like, for example, you had a 10-chapter murder mystery, and you read only the first chapter, the one that the murder takes place. But that's all you read. You don't read the rest of the book where the murder is solved. If your focus is only on the first chapter, are you not going to have a limited understanding of even the first chapter and what it means, as would somebody who read the whole book? Of course. So in the same way, those whose focus is on the cross alone without understanding Christ's high priestly ministry that follows, will not have as good as an understanding of the cross and what it means as would those who have studied Christ's high priestly ministry as well, which follow the cross. Hence, we have what we call our sanctuary message, which includes the cross, which is built upon the cross, which has its foundations in the cross, but is not limited to it. I mean, after all, what do you do with the good portion of the book of Hebrews, which has as its main point Christ's high priestly ministry in the heavenly sanctuary? Now, think about this too. Was the death of the animal in the sanctuary service in any way in tension or in contradiction with the work of the high priest on the Day of Atonement? Was there any kind of tension, any contradiction between them? Of course not. They were two parts of the same whole. Now, if you think there's a tension, if you think there's a contradiction, then you either don't understand the death of the animal, or you don't understand the ministry of the Day of Atonement, or you don't understand both. Okay? Think about Christ's death on the cross now. Now, think about Christ's death on the cross and his high priestly ministry. These are not in tension or in contradiction with each other, are they? Of course not. If your understanding of the cross, symbolized by the death of the animal, is in any way in tension or in contradiction to the pre-Advent judgment symbolized by the high priest, by the work of the high priest on the Day of Atonement, if you've got the cross and your understanding of Christ's high priestly ministry, if they're in tension, then you either don't understand the cross, or you don't understand Christ's high priestly ministry, or you don't understand both, because they are two parts of a whole. They are in harmony with each other. Look at this text, Hebrews 8, 1 and 2. Now, this is the main points which we are saying. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord erected and not man. Now, notice with me, where are these verses? The beginning of chapter 8 in Hebrews, which means that the main point of the first 7 chapters in a book with 13 chapters deals with Christ's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. Yet so much Christianity ignores it. But you see, we as Adventists don't, and we shouldn't, because Christ's high priestly ministry unholds the key to understanding salvation by faith and judgment by works. And again, the crucial text that I believe unlocks this question is Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that is what we're going to study with the focus on two things here. First, how do we get the date 1844 from the Bible? That is going to be the main thrust of this study. That's what we're going to focus, how we get the date. Second, how does this text help resolve the question of judgment by works and salvation by faith? This is what we are going to be dealing with in this study, these two things. Now, we want to start with Daniel 2, a part of the Bible that we all should be familiar with. If not, you need to be. Okay, as we know, the chapter begins when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has a dream that he can't remember, and thus he doesn't understand. Obviously, if he can't remember it, he can't understand it. Well, he gathers all the wise men and orders them to tell him the dream first and then interpret it. After all, if they can tell him a dream that he himself can't remember, then he could trust their interpretation. Of course, these are a bunch of charlatans, and they can't tell him the dream. The king gets mad, and he's going to have everybody killed, including Daniel and the 3 Hebrew captives. But in the end, the Lord reveals to Daniel and the interpretation, and everyone's life is spared. Okay, now, the dream, of course, as we know, if you know Daniel 2, was of a giant statue. The head was of gold, the breasts and arms were of silver, the belly and thighs were of brass, the legs were iron, and the feet part iron and part clay. That's the dream, okay, the statue. But then we come to the last part, and that's the part I want to focus especially on. All these kingdoms in Daniel 2, you got the gold and the silver, blah, 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 they come and go, and then there is this. Finally, a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on the feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces, and the stone became struck the image became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. That's Daniel 2, 34 and 35. That's how it ends. Okay, Daniel then interprets the dream for the king, telling him that the head of gold represented him, the king of Babylon, a symbol for the nation. Babylon was represented by the gold. Afterwards, another kingdom, the silver, would arise, then another, the brass, and then finally, the one on the legs, the iron. The iron breaks apart, and that breaks apart into the iron and clay in the feet, into smaller powers that it says will not cleave one to another, even as iron does not mix with clay. Then finally the stone, this mountain comes down and fills all the earth, and that's symbol of God's final kingdom, and it will stand forever. Now, folks, for centuries, this dream has been interpreted as follows and understood as follows. Okay, Babylon, the gold head. Okay, Medo-Persia, the silver in the arms and the chest. Greece, the belly and brass thighs, okay? Rome, the legs of iron and clay. And then finally, God's eternal kingdom, the stone cut out without hands. Now, a few points to consider when we look at Daniel 2. First of all, this is not just an SDA interpretation, far from it. Millions of Christians and Jews have interpreted this chapter this way for centuries. Get this in your head. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, God's eternal kingdom. In fact, as we go through this, all four of these kingdoms are definitely identified. Daniel comes out and names three of them for us, and with Rome and with the New Testament, the fourth one, Rome, is all but identified for us. We'll cover this more on the website later. But now, here is a key point that I want you to remember. Don't forget this, okay? We've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, okay? This sequence, don't forget, this sequence forms the outline for the rest of the prophecies that we're going to study. All the other prophecies are going to be based on this broad foundation. Okay, this will become clearer as we move on. Now, that's the first point. And we also come to another point that I'm going to repeat and repeat ad nauseum, because once you get it down, you will save yourself from a common error that is taught almost everywhere in Christendom. Almost everywhere. Now listen to this. Unlike the first three kingdoms, whose metals stop after their demise. You got the head of gold, then you got the brass, the silver stops, and then the brass, the gold, silver, brass, and the iron. Unlike these first three kingdoms, whose metals stop after their demise, the iron of the fourth kingdom remains until the end of the world, even if the feet and toes becomes mixed with miry clay. Okay? The legs of iron, its feet, part of iron and part of clay. In other words, listen to this point. The iron that starts in the legs remains in the feet. And the iron stays there all the way to the end. So the point is, the kingdom that began after Greece, after the brass that starts in the leg, extends all the way to the end of the world. It will be there to the bitter end. Okay? So the point. The fourth kingdom, which arose after Greece, and whose legs and toes are of iron, though changing form, extends to the end of the world. Now, this fact helps positively identify this, because what world power arising after Greece, after the bronze and the belly and thighs, the iron, extends all the way to the end of time? What power after Greece all the way to the end, though it changes form? Only one, and that is Rome, solely, totally, and only Rome. What other possible power arises right after ancient Greece, which ended centuries before Christ, yet extends to the end of time and beyond? Again, it could be solely, what could it be but Rome, solely, totally, and only Rome. Look at this again. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, second coming. Now think about this for a minute. What firmer, broader, and more immutable foundation, the history of the world itself, could God have used to build for us such a rational edifice for faith? I mean, the world could blow up tomorrow, but there'll have always been a Babylon, always been a Medo-Persia, always been a Greece, always been a Rome. I mean, if you're God and you're looking down at these people and you want to give these people on earth an immutable foundation, what more broader foundation could he give us than the history of the world? We have been given a foundation as immutable, as unchangeable as the past itself. I mean, even God can't change the past. So this is what God has given to help us ground our faith in. It's a rational faith, to be sure, but it's faith. Anyway, points to remember so far, okay? You've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, God's final kingdom, okay? This sequence performs the prophetic outline for all the rest of what we're going to study. All the other prophecies are basically going to be based on this broad and firm and immutable foundation. That's the first point. Second point, don't forget this. This is crucial. The fourth kingdom, the iron of Rome, which comes up after Greece, extends to the end of time, though at some point it changes form. Hey, if you need to stop this seminar right now and go over this material in Daniel 2, do it. Learn this sequence, see how Rome goes all the way to the end. Learn it so well you could teach it to others all the way through this seminar. I'm going to tell you, if you got to stop and go through this in your Bible, do it till you're perfect. It's really clear. Trust me, you won't be sorry. Anyway, that's Daniel 2. Now I want to go to Daniel 7. It's a chapter that really gives us more than any other one solid reasons for believing in the pre-Advent judgment. I could say pretty safely that if all we had were Daniel 7 alone, we'd have all we would need to believe in it. Okay? Daniel 7 covers the same ground as Daniel 2, only more details are given. Okay? In this chapter, Daniel himself has a dream. Okay? He sees 4 beasts come up out of the sea, and in the visions he's told they represent 4 kingdoms that will arise, one after another, until God establishes a final kingdom that will last forever. 4 kingdoms in succession, and a final kingdom that lasts forever? Now, if I'm not mistaken, didn't we just see something like that in Daniel 2? Of course. As I said, many of the chapters that follow are simply expanding on what we have in Daniel 2. Don't forget that point. Anyway, in Daniel 7, he sees 4 beasts, which he tells represents 4 kingdoms, okay? The first beast was like a lion, but it had eagle's wings. The second was like a bear. The third was a leopard. And the fourth was described like this, okay? Look at this. The fourth beast, Daniel 7, 7, and 8. He says, and after this I saw in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Okay, notice now, 4 kingdoms, a 4th beast. Dreadful and terrible, and it had huge iron teeth, and there was a little horn that came up from among them, and on and on and on. You can read that more carefully yourself. He sees these beasts, including this 4th one, out of which a horn grows. Now, we're going to come back to that very shortly, that horn shortly. But the point is, what do these beasts represent? Well, again, it's commonly understood by both Jewish and Christian expositors that we have in Daniel 7 a repetition of Daniel 2, though now more details are being added. Okay? So look at Daniel 7 here. Okay? We got the lion is Babylon, the bear Medo-Persia, the Greece is the leopard, the 4th beast Rome, God's final kingdom. This is how it has been interpreted for centuries. Again, this is not some distinctly SDA interpretation. Many scholars and many different religions have seen this as well. Same interpretation. Now, what's interesting, too, is that amid all these images, Daniel asks what all this means. And look at what he is told. Look at what the interpretation itself that is given to him. Daniel 7, 17 and 18 says, those great beasts, which are 4 kingdoms which arise out of the earth. 4 kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Again, what have we said before? 4 kingdoms followed by God's eternal one? Sounds somewhat like Daniel 2, does it not? 4 kingdoms and then God's final one comes. Then, interestingly enough, look what comes next. Look what comes next. Okay, then I wish to know the truth about the 4th beast, who was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped and trampled the residue with its feet. Okay, Daniel, notice here, Daniel wants us to focus specifically on the fourth beast. Now, notice with me some important similarities between the fourth beast in Daniel 7 and the fourth power in Daniel 2. I want you to see this. Okay? First, of course, they're the fourth power to arise in both chapters. Okay? These are some of the similarities. They're the fourth chapter in both chapters. Both come after Greece, and both are the last earthly kingdom before God establishes his final one. What's next? Both have iron in them. The fourth kingdom was almost all of iron, and the fourth beast, that's in Daniel 2, and the fourth beast in Daniel 7 is said to have iron teeth. The fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 is described that one that smashes and breaks things, other nations obviously. And the fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 is described in a similar way, saying it devoured and brake in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. Okay, and the most important similarity between the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 and the fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 is this. Both change forms, even though they remain the same power right down to the end of time. Don't miss this. The statue in Daniel 2, the legs were of iron and the feet and toes were of what? Iron and clay. The point is the iron, which began after Greece, extends all the way down to the end of time, when the stone cut out without hands smashes it all. In other words, the iron, again, which arose after Greece, remains to the end of time, though it changed form. In the case of Daniel 2, it becomes mixed with clay, but it was still iron all the way from after Greece until the end of the world. Don't miss that point. Similarly, what we have in Daniel 7 are four kingdoms, with the last one, the fourth one, which arises after Greece and extends all the way to the end of the world, though at some point it changes form. And it's in that second form, the latter form, that it reaches its ultimate demise at the end of the world, okay? Just like in Daniel 2. And the second phase is the little horn power that arises out of the fourth beast and becomes the focus of the prophecy. Look at these texts with me, okay? Daniel 7, 7, 8. And I saw in night visions, and behold, a fourth beast. And it had 10 horns. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. So a little horn power arises out of the fourth beast. Now notice too, in the description of the fourth beast, a great deal of emphasis is placed on the little horn power. It becomes the focal of the prophecy. Now here's the point. Don't miss this. The little horn power is not a separate power. It's still part of the fourth beast, just a different phrase of it. Please get this down. In Daniel 7, as in Daniel 2, the fourth and final power goes all the way from the demise of Greece to the end of the world. I keep doing this because I'm thinking of Daniel 2, but it's the same principle. Now, a simple question. What power comes up after Greece and extends all the way down through history, even into our present era? Folks, what could it be but Rome? First pagan Rome, then papal Rome, the second phase of the fourth beast. Okay, here's Daniel 7 again. The lion is Babylon, the bear is Medo-Persia, the leopard is Greece, and the fourth beast is Rome, pagan then papal Rome. Now, we'll focus now on the fourth beast which caught Daniel's attention. He sees this horrible beast arise right out of Greece. Well, what power arose out of Greece? Of course, as we've been saying, Rome, pagan Rome first. What else could it be? But then what happens? As I said, the fourth beast power had 10 horns on its head. But then another power arises among them, a horn that is part of another horn arises, but it's part of the fourth beast. Get this point. It's not a separate power. It's still a part of Rome, this horn, though a different phase. Again, forgive me for repeating this point, but I can't emphasize it enough, okay? The little horn power is part of the fourth beast. Now, what are the attributes of this little horn power? The little horn phase of the fourth beast? Well, in fact, there are many. In fact, the main emphasis is on this little horn power that arises out of the fourth beast, but remains part of it. The fact that there's so much emphasis placed on this and so many details are given should tell us something about its great importance. Now, let's read these texts themselves together. Now remember where we've been. We've just been through the first three powers: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. We're now on the fourth one. Here again now is the vision of the fourth beast. And he says, and this I saw in night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, okay? And it had 10 horns, and I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things, pompous words. First, we see that the beast power that arises right after Greece. Then out of this beast power, a little horn arises, a horn that uproots 3 other horns and that speaks pompous words. Now, here is the interpretation of the beast power and the horn that comes out of it but remains part of it. This is what the scripture says about it. Okay. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and he shall devour the whole earth and trample and break it in pieces. And then he goes on. The 10 horns are 10 kings which will arise from this kingdom. Notice they're from this kingdom. They're part of the kingdom. And another shall arise after them, and he shall be different from the first one, and he shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws. Now, why do we interpret the little horn that arises out of the fourth beast, pagan Rome, as papal Rome? Now, again, please, folks, this is not just an SDA interpretation. Far from it. For centuries, it was one of the central teaching of the Protestant reformers. Jewish scholars have seen it as well. We'll deal with more of this on the website. But why? Why is papal Rome the only correct interpretation? Well, let's look at it carefully, because this leads us right to where we want to go. Now, notice with me, too, that many details are given about this phase of the fourth beast. Many details are given, more than anything else we've seen in any of the prophecies so far. If nothing else, that should tell us how important this little horn power is to us, okay, and our understanding of it, okay? First, the little horn rose out of pagan Rome. Okay, papal Rome, of course, rose from pagan Rome. That's the first one. In fact, look at this quote. British philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who lived in the 1600s, wrote, listen to this quote, I like this. If a man consider the origin of this great ecclesiastical dominion, he will easily perceive that the papacy is no other than the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire, sitting crowned on the grace thereof. Thomas Hobbes from Leviathan. Okay, the little horn came up from among 10 horns that were part of the fourth beast. The pagan Roman Empire, instead of disappearing, simply was picked apart by various barbarian tribes, the 10 horns seen in the beast. And then among those tribes was this new horn, another tribe, this little horn, which was kind of like another one of the tribes almost. The papacy just did that. It arose among these tribes, okay? Verse said that it would subdue 3 kings, meaning it would uproot 3 of those tribes, which the papacy obviously did. Now, notice this. The little horn was described as different from the other ones. And certainly the papacy, earlier I said it was a tribe that really wouldn't call it a tribe. It was just another power, another entity, but it was certainly different from all those other barbarian kingdoms, okay? And the little horn power in earlier depiction was described as greater than these other little horn powers, which it obviously was because it alone became dominant. Again, this is a perfect depiction of the papacy. After all, it still exists today when those barbarian tribes disappeared a long time ago. Okay? Now, the little horn power is described as speaking pompous words against the Most High. I'm not going to have time to get into that now, but we will, anyone who knows anything at all about the claims that the Roman papacy has made for itself, and still does, knows that this is a perfect depiction of the papacy. Perfect. We'll deal with this more on the website. Okay? The little horn shall persecute the saints of the Most High. Okay? This is another description. Please, however much all this has been glossed over in recent years with all the ecumenical talks and so forth, the fact that remains that for more than 1,000 years, Rome viciously and violently persecuted those who dared to oppose her. with things getting really bad in the days of the Reformation. Again, this is a perfect description of papal Rome. Okay. Now, another attribute. The little horn power will, quote, intend to change times and law, Daniel 7:25. Now, what Adventist doesn't know how central papal Rome was in the, quote, official change of the seventh-day Sabbath to Sunday? I mean, history is filled with quotes. See, it's interesting, too, because most of those quotes were from years ago, when the papacy would kind of taunt Protestants about this change. But they don't do that so much anymore, not in this era of ecumenism. Though here's a later quote. I'll put it up here. You can read it yourself. You know, stop the tape and read it yourself and so on, because this says very clear, Rome claiming the change of the Sabbath to Sunday. Okay? Now, we come to the last attribute of the little horn power. And in some ways, for our purposes, the most important one. Now, I say that because of all the things that we have so far, we have more than enough evidence to show here that we are dealing with papal Rome. Please, folks, what else could it be? It can't be anything else, not if you're going to be true to the text. But now, look at this last attribute that we're given here regarding this little horn power. It says, the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Daniel 7:25. Now, what do we have here? First of all, we have in the prophecies that we have been looking at so far, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we have our first apocalyptic time prophecy. Apocalyptic meaning last days. Thus, with all the symbols that we've looked at, we're not given any time frame until now. Now, what does this time and half a time mean? Again, a lot of scholars, Christian and Jewish, understand the word time to mean year, times to mean 2 years, and half a time, half a year. So what do we have? Very simple. We have 3.5 years, time, times, and half a times. And again, I stress this is not a uniquely SDA interpretation, far from it. Okay, what is it talking about? Now, the first thing you have to realize when you look at this prophecy, this time prophecy does not talk about the demise of the little horn. It's saying only that for this period, 3.5 years, the saints will be given into his hands, a reference to the earlier verse when it said that he would persecute the saints of the Most High. The persecution would last for this time frame. Now, what's fascinating, and many have picked up on this, is that parallel passages in the book of Revelation help us come to understand better what this time period means. Look at this. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a times from the face of the serpent. Dealing with persecution here. Times, and half a time, just as in Daniel 7:25. Now, the same thing here in Revelation 12:14, the woman fleeing persecution is depicted a few verses earlier in Revelation like this. Look at this. And the woman fled into the wilderness. We're dealing with persecution, where she had a place prepared for her of God, that it should feed her there 1,060 days. What do we have here? Both verses talk about a woman in the wilderness for a length of time in the context of persecution, as Daniel 7:25. And the same time period is depicted as 1,260 days one time, 3.5 years as another. Okay, 1,260 days or 1,260 days is the same thing as the time, and dividing of time. Now, in this verse of the book of Revelation, the language is very similar to Daniel 7, talking about the little horn. Look at this. Okay? And there was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given him to continue 42 months. Okay? The power that speaks blasphemy continues for 42 months. Look at Daniel 7:25. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, and half a time. Sounds like we're talking about the same thing here. Well, we are. So look at the time prophecies given us. We got a time, times, and half a time. We've got 42 months and 1,260 days. First, what is this 42 months? What does that equal? Well, 1 year is 12 months. 2 years is 24 months. So that comes to 36 months. We have only half a year left. Half a year is 6 months. 36 and 6 equals how many months? What do you know? 42 months. Same as in Revelation 13:5. Okay? And there was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and powers was given him to continue 42 months. These verses together show that in prophetic time, a year equals 360 days, because you got 42 months, 1,260 days. You do the math, and you'll see. So look at this. 1 year equals 360 days. 2 years equals 720 days. Half a year equals 180 days. 360, 720, 180, 1,260. Instead of giving you the math, I did it for you. Okay, so we got 1,260 days. The 1,260 days is the same as the 3.5 years, which is the same as the 42 months. So our first time prophecy here in Daniel 7:25 is 3.5 years or 42 months or 1,260 days. If you got to stop and look at that yourself, get it down, you'll see it. Now, anyone who studied Bible prophecy is familiar with what is known as the day-year principle. And please, again, and I emphasize this, like these other things, this is not a unique SDA idea. Scholars for centuries have applied the day-year principle to many of these prophecies, including this one. And what it means is simply in prophetic time, a day equals a year. The website will have a lot of information on the day-year principle. In fact, I believe that we can prove that the day-year principle must be used in these very prophecies, that's the only way they make that sense. We can show that the day-year principle is built right into the prophecies themselves, and we will do that on the website. But for our immediate purposes here, there are a few texts that show the reality of the day principle, that of a day equaling a year in prophetic literature. And now here are two commonly used ones, okay? Here are two commonly used ones. Numbers 14:34, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, okay? Each day, 1 year, 40 days, 40 years, very clear. It's even clearer here in Ezekiel 4:6. And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side, and you shall bear your iniquity for the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year. I mean, so we see it, a day for a year. And this truth is so much, and the truth is that there's so much internal evidence for the day-year principle in these prophecies that we really don't even need these texts in Ezekiel and Numbers. But we'll use them for now. But let me give you one example. I want to give you two reasons why you need the day-year principle here. First, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 cover thousands of years of history, right? I mean, it starts out with Babylon, more than 600 years before Christ, goes through Christ, and then it goes with Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece. It comes right down through the millennia to our time and into the future, okay? Because it starts with ancient Babylon. The point is, more than 2,600 years are covered here. Now, in this prophecy covering all this time, you know, we're given a time prophecy concerning one of these powers, a power that's greatly emphasized in the prophecy. The fact is, a great deal of emphasis is placed on it, more than any of these other massive empires. And amid more than the 2.5 millennium covered here, this time prophecy covering this major power covers only a literal 3.5 years. I mean, it's possible, but not very probable, considering the scope of everything, okay? Considering this whole scope of the prophecy, then would not applying the day-year principle, meaning it would cover 1,260 years as opposed to 3.5, doesn't that make better sense, given the vast context of what is being talked about in the chapters, a context that covers these long, long epochs? Of course it makes better sense. Again, considering the size and scope and time element of the entire chapter, it's really the only thing that makes sense. Second, folks, look at Daniel 7. Look at that for a minute. It's really not about a lion that has eagle's wings, or a leopard with 4 heads, or a beast with iron teeth, or a talking horn. These are all what? Of course, they're symbols. It's prophetic symbolism, images pointing to things other than themselves. Okay? So amid all these prophetic symbols, none of which are to be taken literally, should not the time prophecy be seen as symbolic and not literal as well? Of course. In a sense, it would be preposterous to take it literally. If we don't, and we do prophetic, then what do we have? Okay? There are 2 points that we have established here, 2 points that are crucial. Okay, first, the little horn power in Daniel 7 is papal Rome. I'm sorry, folks, it's solely, totally, only Rome. It can be nothing else. Second, we must apply the day-year principle to the time, times, and dividing of time, which comes out to 1,260 days, which comes out to 1,260 years. Now, with just these 2 points firmly established, we can get a general understanding of the time frame here. See, the papacy, the little horn power, didn't arise out of pagan Rome in a day. But we know basically from history that in the 500s AD, the Pope was declared the head of all churches and the corrector of heretics. I mean, its power was basically starting to get firmly cemented around that time. So you've got somewhere in the 500s. Now you go 1,260 years later, 1,260 years, then you're brought what? Into the 1700s. Most likely later in the 1700s, because you're going 1,260 years sometime after the 500s in AD. Okay? Thus again, with just 2 firmly established points. Number 1, the little horn is the papacy, and the time, times, and dividing of time needs the day-year principle. We have the basic time frame of the persecution depicted as in the prophecy. See, as Adventists, we use 538 to 1798 as the 2 specific years with very good reasons, and we can look at that in more detail on the website. I don't really want to deal so much with that now, though we'll come back to it. But for our purposes right now, we can stick with the more general time frame, which is seen in the prophecy itself. So what does it mean, this prophecy? Where does it take us? What have we seen so far in Daniel 7? Look at this, okay? Again, Daniel 7. Repeat, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, with the first time prophecy from somewhere in the 500s to the late 1700s AD, or we like to use 538 to 1798. Now, if you need to stop and review this, do so. I mean, take your Bible and go through this, but make sure you follow the logic here. With our first prophetic time prophecy, we can help establish a specific historical background for what we have been shown in the prophecy. But now, say you've done that and you understand it. What happens next in this prophecy, in the prophetic sequence? What comes after papal Rome and the prophecy given it? Look at the sequence, right from Daniel 7, 8 through 10, and 13 and 14. Follow closely because this is crucial. We're coming to the crux of things. What do the texts say? What happens after this depiction of the little horn power? Okay. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, a horn where we've gone through that, with the little horn power. What happens next? What happens next in the prophecy? I beheld till the thrones were cast down, the judgment was set, and the books were opened. Okay, and then what happens after? And there was given a kingdom and dominion and glory, and a kingdom which shall not pass away, and a kingdom which shall not be destroyed. What is happening here? Verse 8 describes the papacy, the little horn power of the papacy. What immediately comes in the prophecy? Some kind of heavenly judgment scene. And then what follows after? But God establishes eternal kingdom, one that will not pass away, the kingdom which follows the second coming of Jesus. Look at the specific order of events here. I can't stress how crucial this is. You got the little horn, papal persecution. Then you've got a judgment, some kind of heavenly judgment, and then you've got God's kingdom, which comes after the second coming. Again, read these verses over and over until it's seared in your brain, because what they teach is very important. It's so important, in fact, that the exact sequence of events are repeated in the same chapter. Let's read Daniel 7, 21 and 22. Okay, look at this. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Little horn power, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. Judgment, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. I mean, how much clearer could it be? Little horn, judgment, God's eternal kingdom. In fact, it's so important that it appears for a third time. The same three events in the same sequence. This time, though, we'll include pagan Rome, which was the early part of the papal phase, just to help you see the context better. What comes next? The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. Okay, we know that. And 10 horns. Then we got the little horn, and they shall be given into his hand a time and dividing time. Our first apocalyptic time prophecy, 1260 years. What comes next? But the judgment shall sit, and the kingdom and dominion and greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Look at this, folks. How much clearer could it be? Here, the fourth kingdom, papal Rome, pagan Rome, followed by papal Rome, then the little horn with the first time prophecy regarding the fourth power, followed by judgment, which then leads to the second coming and God's eternal kingdom. Now again, 3 times we have this sequence. You can't miss it. Little horn power. I mean, phase ending in the late 1700s, or we say more specifically 1798. You got the little horn power, then you got a judgment in heaven, and then God's eternal kingdom is established. I mean, folks, how much more clear, simpler, or more firmly established could God have made these things for us? Things that are rooted in the history of the world. Again, if you need to stop this seminar and study this from the Bible till it's perfectly clear, do it. You know, I need faith to believe in a lot of things we teach. Resurrection of the dead, the second coming, a new heavens and a new earth. But really, how much faith does it take to believe in these prophecies? These are history, things firmly rooted in the past, which means they can't change. It's as solid as a foundation as we're going to find for just about anything. We've had one kingdom after another come up just as prophesied. This can all be verified by history, the history of the world, which is, that's pretty big and broad. In the midst of all this verifiable history, we are told about this heavenly judgment, which comes up after the first apocalyptic time prophecy in Daniel, and yet before the second coming. In fact, if you really look at it carefully, this judgment leads directly to the second coming. But that's something else we'll cover later on the website. With everything else happening as firm as history, we have every reason to trust in this judgment as well. So look at what we have here so far. Look at this. This is where we've come. We've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, then papal Rome. Okay, and they shall be given into his hand for a time dividing of time, apocalyptic time prophecy. But the judgment shall sit, and then the kingdom and dominion shall be given to the whole heaven, and shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. Look at this is the sequence. And this judgment, this massive end-time judgment, is what leads to the second coming itself. Now, let's take a look at what we have seen so far. Okay, again, we've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, persecution from 6th century to the 18th century AD. It's all sequential. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the persecution, judgment in heaven, God's eternal kingdom. Again, folks, take your time to learn this. As I said, if you've got to turn this off and go through your Bible until it's utterly clear, do it. What is certain is that amid the sequence of world kingdoms, something that is as firm and immovable as world history itself, the Bible reveals the reality of some kind of pre-Advent judgment in heaven that's so clear, a judgment that occurs after the period of persecution, which we date as ending sometime around 1798, that time frame, and yet before the second coming of Jesus. Again, this is as solid and as firm and as immovable as world history itself. I said earlier that Daniel 2 formed the basis of all the prophecies that we have studied. And we can see, as we can see, that's true. Thus, here again, here's where we've come. Look at the parallel here, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Babylon, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia, Greece, Greece, Rome, Rome. That phase ending in 1798. After that, this judgment in heaven, and then God's final kingdom. Thus, at this juncture, there's really one main point that you need to see. Catch this point, okay? There is a massive judgment in heaven, and it occurs after the times, and dividing of time in Daniel 7:25, yet before the second coming of Jesus. A massive judgment before the coming, hence the advent of Jesus, hence it's a pre-advent judgment. And again, I stress, go over these prophecies until you can see the parallels and see the sequence of event. It's firm and solid and as broad as world history itself. What a powerfully rational foundation upon which to build our trust in the Word of God and these prophecies. Now, with the background of everything that we've gone through, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, I want to go to Daniel 8. And you're going to quickly see that Daniel 8, though using different symbols, covers much of what we have already studied, but with a different emphasis, adding and enriching what we've already seen. Now, just as in Daniel 2 and in Daniel 7, Daniel 8 is divided into two main sections. It's a supernatural revelation, in this case a vision, followed by an explanation of the vision. And Daniel 8 starts out like this, simple enough. Okay? Daniel 8:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. Okay? 8:1. So as I said, the chapter starts out with a vision, as did the previous chapter, Daniel 7, which he might even be referring to here, because he talked about the vision which appeared to me at first. And if we read the chapter, we can see that in the vision of Daniel 8, 4 main elements appear, 4 main symbols. Because, as we've seen, these visions and dreams come first in symbols, symbols that are later interpreted. And as we've seen so far, much of what's being revealed to us here has to do with the rise and fall of great empires. And it's no different in Daniel 8. In the vision, Daniel 8, Daniel is first shown a ram. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, behold, there stood before the river a ram. Okay, simple enough. He sees a ram. What next? And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat. Okay, after the ram, he sees a goat. What next? Daniel 8:9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. So what comes next is a little horn power. After describing in detail, a lot more detail than given to any of the other powers, the activity of this little horn, the vision itself ends with this verse. Look at this verse. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Thus, the vision of Daniel 8 consists of really 4 elements, just 4 elements. They are Daniel 8, a ram, a he-goat, a little horn, and the sanctuary cleanse. Again, please read the first 14 verses over until you can see this sequence. It is crucial. Now, sure, there are a lot of details in here that we can look at on the website. We don't want to deal with them now. But for our immediate purpose, the key issue here in Daniel 8 is the sequence of events. Catch this. A ram, a goat, a little horn, and the sanctuary cleanse. This has to be seen and understood for this prophecy to make sense. And fortunately, it's all pretty clear, cut, and dry. A ram, goat, little horn, sanctuary cleansed. Okay, boom. Now, just as we saw in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, this dream or vision, this is symbolic. Daniel 8's not about a ram and a goat and a little horn any more than Daniel 7 was about winged lions and leopards and so on. Or Daniel was really about a statue made of iron and clay in the feet. These are symbols, symbols of something greater than themselves. What then is Daniel 8 about? Well, as in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, an explanation follows. What does it say? Well, the angel Gabriel comes in Daniel 8 and gives him an explanation of most of what followed. Now notice what Gabriel explained. He explains most, but not all of the vision. I'm going to hammer that in ad nauseum. What do we have? Gabriel comes and says, the ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Huh? Media and Persia? Didn't we come across that empire already? Of course, we did in both Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And what do you know? Media Persia appears again in Daniel 8, only there's no guesswork. It is named. Gabriel comes right out and names the kingdom himself. Now, the logical question is, where is Babylon? Which we saw in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Daniel 8, however, skips Babylon and starts with Medo-Persia. Now, why would it do that? Well, let me give you the short answer. It has to do with the dating of the vision, which was near the end of the Babylonian Empire. I imagine that the Lord wanted to focus on the kingdoms that would follow and not waste time on Babylon, which was soon to be kaput and pass from the scene anyway. Okay, so the point is, we start out with Medo-Persia named for us, okay? What comes next? What was the goat, the next animal in the vision? And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, Greece. Greece? What do you know? The same power that we saw in both Daniel 7 and in Daniel 2. So what do we have? So far then, between Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8, we have Babylon, which was named in Daniel 2, then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, both of which named for us as well. So we've got 3 of the kingdoms named for us, okay? Now there's one more kingdom that arises in Daniel 8, the kingdom that follows Greece. A kingdom that follows Greece. What does Gabriel say? What is that little horn power depicted in the vision itself? That arose after the he-goat, which arose after Greece. What was that? What does he say? He says, and a king of fierce countenance shall stand up and shall destroy wonderfully and prosper, and shall destroy a persecuting power, the mighty and holy people, but he shall stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken without hand. So what do we have but another power? A persecuting power, one that destroys God's people, a power that arises after Greece, but then what? What does the explanation say? What does it say? It will be broken without hand. Without hand. Where did we see that before? A breaking without hand. Of course, it was the vision of Daniel 2, the stone that was cut out without hand that destroyed the statue. That is, it was the supernatural intervention of God at the end of the world. And the amazing thing is, a similar image is used here in Daniel 8 for the end of the little horn power, the final kingdom in the vision. Okay? You watched until, here's Daniel 2:34, you watched while a stone cut out without hands, which struck the image on the feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. That was Daniel 2. And then we have the same imagery here. Thus, there's a supernatural ending to the little horn power of Daniel 8, just as there was to the little horn in Daniel 7 and the statue in Daniel 2. Can you see the parallels here? Very closely linked. Now, notice something here crucial with me. This is important. The final power in Daniel 8 arises after Greece and extends to the end of the world where it is supernaturally destroyed. Again, what is the only power that could be? Of course, Rome. Just as in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, the power that comes up after Greece remains until the end of the world where it's supernaturally destroyed. It's the same power in all 3 chapters. Rome. In fact, let me share a few thoughts that help nail down this identification even more. Trust me, we'll have more of this on the website, but look at this with me. First, the vision itself, the ram is described as great. So Medo-Persia is depicted as a great power. The he-goat, which comes up next, is described as very great. So Medo-Persia is great. Greece is very great. It's greater. Okay? Then this little horn power, this next power that comes up after Greece, is described as exceeding great. So, whatever the power is that arises after Medo-Persia in Greece is greater than them both. Now, folks, you tell me, a power rising after Greece that is greater than either Greece or Medo-Persia, what is the only power it could be? Of course, Rome. Solely, totally, only Rome. What else? Greater than either Medo-Persia or Greece. Now, 2, look at the parallels. I want you to look at the parallels between the little horn of Daniel 7, which we saw was the papal phase of Rome. Now, though the transition from pagan to papal Rome is found in Daniel 8 as well, it's not as obvious as the others. Believe me, we will get into this on the website. The point is, in both chapters, though, the emphasis really is on the papal phase. Now, I want you to look at these parallels with me. Okay? First, both are depicted by the same symbol, a little horn. Both arise after Greece. Both are persecuting powers. Both are blasphemous powers. Both are supernaturally destroyed by God in the last days. Now, let's just be a little logical here. When you have two powers arising in the same sequence, with the same symbol, doing the same things, and pretty much ending in the same way, it's pretty clear that we are dealing with the same power. And that power is solely, totally, and only Rome. Pagan and papal, though by far, the emphasis is on the papal phase. Now, what is the final element in the vision? As we saw, it was the sanctuary being cleansed. What is the final element in the explanation? What do you know? The same thing. This is what the last two verses say in the explanation. In other words, right after describing, after you got one power, then another, then the little horn power, the explanation says the following. And the vision of the evening and morning, that's Daniel 8:14, was told as true. And I was astonished at the vision and not understood it. Now, I cheated a little by putting Daniel 8:14 in there. But at first glance, one would say, what does that have to do with Daniel 8:14? But see, that's easy to see because Daniel 8:14 reads more literally, unto 2,300 evening morning, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The word days is a translation of evening and morning. So the Daniel 8:26 is talking about the vision of the evening and morning. It's a reference to Daniel 8:14, okay? Thus, in the vision, as in the explanation, the sanctuary being cleansed, thus in the vision, as in the explanation, the sanctuary being cleansed, and the explanation about it being cleansed, both occur after the symbol for Rome. And yet, look at these texts. The vision of the evening and morning, the vision about the sanctuary being cleansed, was not explained to him, as were the elements that preceded it, the ram, the goat, and the little horn. He says he didn't understand what it was about. He says very clearly in the last verse of Daniel 8, I none understood it. What didn't he understand? The part of the vision about the sanctuary being cleansed. Don't miss this. Everything else was explained but that part. Thus, Daniel 8 ends with the part about the sanctuary being cleansed remaining unexplained. This point will become important later when we come to Daniel 9. Thus, what do we have in Daniel 8? Look at what we've got. We've got Medo-Persia, the ram, the he-goat, Greece, the little horn, pagan and papal Rome, and the sanctuary cleansed. Now, I want you to think about something for a minute here with me. Daniel 8 consists of just 4 elements. The ram, a goat, a little horn, and the sanctuary cleansed. Okay, how much? Study this till you see it. Ram, goat, little horn, sanctuary cleansed. 4 elements, no more. The ram was Medo-Persia, a major power of great importance in the history of the world and the history of God's people. Okay, that's the one. Then comes the goat, Greece, a major power of great importance in the history of the world and the history of God's people. Then came the little horn, Rome, which was a major power in the history of the world and in the history of God's people for sure. Okay, now think about this. Of the 4 events, 3 are of major importance in the history of the world and the history of God's people. Now think about this point. If the first 3, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, are of such significance, what does that automatically tell us about the 4th event, the cleansing of the sanctuary, the event that climaxes the vision? Of course, it tells us that whatever this was, it was of major importance, okay? Climaxing, as it were, the first 3 events. See, I've told people, I don't care what you think about the cleansing of the sanctuary is. Even if you reject what we as Adventists say, it still has to be something of major significance. I mean, Medo-Persia was major significance. Greece was major significance. Rome. And then the 4th element, the climactic element, whatever it is, that's got to be of major significance. And as far as I know, Adventists are the only one who give it any significance at all. And what is it that deserves not only to be placed among these major events? What is it that it should climax it? Well, here's what it is. It's the great judgment depicted in Daniel 7 that leads to the end of the world and establishment of God's final kingdom. Is that great enough for you? Let's look at the parallels between the 3 chapters we have studied so far. This is really the point where all that has come before leads to. You must take the time to see these parallels for yourself. If you'll do, you'll have pretty much all that you need to know and understand what's going on here. Look at these parallels here. This is crucial. We've got Babylon in Daniel 2, Babylon in Daniel 7. Same events. As we saw, Babylon's not mentioned in Daniel 8 because it's pretty much soon to fade away. Then we got Medo-Persia, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8. Okay? All the same events in the same sequence in perfect parallel. Then comes Greece all the way through. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, a perfect parallel. Then there's Daniel, as in Daniel 2 is Rome, Daniel 7 is Rome, and Daniel 8 is Rome. Perfect parallel. Then following the chronological and historical sequence that we have in Daniel 7, a great judgment scene that leads to the end of the world. Remember, that came up right after that phase of Rome. And in perfect parallel, and that is in perfect parallel to the cleansing of the sanctuary, which leads to the end of the little horn, as it did in Daniel 7, leads to the end of the world, a demise that comes without hand. Just as it was with the stone in Daniel 2, the stone that ended the world as we know it. The point is, folks, study this chart. If you need to stop the video here, study this from your Bible. Let it burn in your brain. See this parallel between Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8. Folks, if this was all that we had, we would have enough to know that the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8 is the same thing as the heavenly judgment in Daniel 7, and it occurs after the specific time frame of the little horn power and before the second coming of Jesus. Again, we have been given in Daniel 7 our first apocalyptic time prophecy, one rooted in something as firm as world history itself. And it's after this time frame, it's after that specific frame that the judgment occurs. And that judgment is the same thing as the cleansing of the sanctuary. Thus, look at it like this. Start out Babylon. Babylon ends in mid-6th century BC. Then you got Medo-Persia, and somewhere 4th century BC. Then Greece until 2nd century BC. Then you've got Rome, pagan and papal Rome, depicted with our first apocalyptic time prophecy, 1260 years, that takes us into the 18th century. If you want specifically 1798, then after that date, you've got a judgment in heaven, which is the same thing as the cleansing of the sanctuary, and it all ends with God establishing his eternal kingdom. Again, God has given us a foundation as solid and immovable and as verifiable as history itself, world history itself. And it's on this incredibly firm foundation of world empires that he has revealed to us this pre-Advent judgment and the general time frame for it. After 1798, but before the second coming of Jesus. Now, we're still not done. We can nail this down even more precisely, which is what I want to do. First, I want you to notice with me something about the 3 chapters that we have studied. Daniel 2 was a dream, and then a complete explanation of the dream. Daniel 7 was a vision, and then a complete explanation of the vision. Daniel 8 was a vision, but then only a partial explanation of the vision. Remember what we saw. The vision about the evening and the part of the vision about the evening and morning, the 2300 days of verse 14 was not explained. He didn't understand it. Daniel 8, 26 and 27 again. And the vision of the evening and mornings was true. Okay, notice he's emphasizing that it's true. And I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. He didn't understand the final part of the whole vision, the part about the vision of the 2300 evenings and mornings. So look at this. Daniel 2, you got a dream and a full explanation. Daniel 7, a dream or a vision and a full explanation. Daniel 8, a vision and a partial explanation. Of the 4 elements in Daniel 8, the ram, the goat, the little horn, and the sanctuary being cleansed, only the part about the sanctuary being cleansed. The vision of the evening and morning was not explained. Daniel was very clear that he didn't understand the specific part of what was shown to him. The crucial point is that the last time we see Daniel not having an understanding of anything was in regards to the vision about the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8:14. That was the only part of the vision in Daniel 8 that was not explained, the only part he did not understand. Now, we come to Daniel 9, the final chapter that we're going to look at. And Daniel 9 consists of two parts. There's a prayer, and then there's the appearance of an angel, or a supernatural revelation, as it were. So first there's a prayer, okay? Now, if you'll read Daniel's prayer, this is a crucial point. You'll see nowhere in the prayer does Daniel at any time seek for an explanation about anything. He understands why everything has happened. Not one time does he say, Lord, why this? Lord, why did all these things happen? He knows why, and he says so repeatedly in his prayer. His prayer is not a prayer for any kind of explanation of anything at all. Okay? So, the last time, as I said, the last time we see Daniel needing an explanation was about the vision of the 2300 evening and mornings. Don't miss this point, okay? Anyway, Daniel prays and he offers his prayer, confessing his sins and the sins of Israel. Then what happened next? Daniel 9:20 through 22. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, and he said, O Daniel, I've now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Gabriel comes to give him skill and understanding? Skill and understanding about what? Well, as we said, what was the last thing that, according to the text, he didn't understand? As I've been saying and explaining all along, the last thing he didn't understand was the prophecy of the 2300 days. In fact, the Hebrew word for understand in Daniel 8:27, when Daniel says he didn't understand the vision of the 2300 days, is the same root word used in Daniel 9:22, when Gabriel comes and says he's come to give him skill and understanding. Thus, we have a strong linguistic link here right from the start. Also, notice too who has come to give Daniel skill and understanding. Who was it? It was the angel Gabriel. When was the last time Gabriel appeared? If you read Daniel 8, you'll know that after Daniel was given the vision in the first 14 verses, the angel Gabriel is told to make Daniel understand it. Here's Gabriel in Daniel 8. And I heard a voice between the banks of the Ulai, and he said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. Thus, the same angel whom we saw in Daniel 8, in the context of explaining to Daniel the meaning of what he's seen, now comes to Daniel again and tells him he's come to give him skill and understanding. Skill and understanding about what? Well, Gabriel tells him, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel has seen at the beginning, he goes on, and he says, O Daniel, I've now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. What vision? Well, the last vision that Daniel didn't understand, the last vision that Daniel had in which he did understand, as we've said, is the vision about the 2300 evening and mornings of Daniel 8:14. Remember, Daniel 8 ended with him saying specifically that he didn't understand the vision about the evening and mornings, the cleansing of the sanctuary. How much clearer could it be? He has come to explain to Daniel the 2300 days. In fact, there's more. Look with me at Daniel 8:1 and 2. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, and I saw the vision, and I saw in vision. 3 times you got the word vision there. And it's using the Hebrew word there, hazon. We're just going to use a little bit of Hebrew here. Now notice the words for vision. Hazon. Daniel then describes what he saw in the vision. He uses this word. He describes the ram, the goat, the little horn, and so forth. So the point is, the Hebrew word for vision here, hazon, refers to the whole vision of Daniel 8. However, let's go back. Let's look at Daniel 8:26 and 27. When Daniel talks specifically about the vision of the evening and morning, what do the texts say? And the vision of the evening and morning, which was told is true, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Notice, we've got 2 different words here. We have even though it's translated vision. The word for vision, hazon, refers to the whole vision in Daniel 8. We saw that already. In contrast, the word mare is used specifically in reference to the vision of the evening and mornings, the part that he didn't understand, the very part that Gabriel comes to give him understanding about. So hazon is for the whole vision of Daniel 8. Mare specifically for the vision regarding the 2300 evenings of Daniel 8:14. Now, let's look at what Gabriel says to Daniel in chapter 9. So we got Gabriel, the same angel interpreter appears to him in Daniel 8, appears to him again, and he specifically tells him that he's come to give him skill and understanding. And as we said, the last thing that he did not understand was the vision, the mare of the evening of the 2300 evening and mornings. Okay? What does Daniel say to him? What does Gabriel say to him? Here's the text again. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I'd seen in the vision at the beginning. So he's pointing back to Gabriel. Oh, Daniel, I've now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the mare. Mare? What mare? What vision? The vision, the mare of the 2300 evening and mornings that he specifically said he did not understand. Okay? Thus, we have the same angel interpreter as Daniel 8, who comes to give Daniel understanding, and the last thing he didn't understand was the mare of Daniel 8:14. How much clearer could it be that in Daniel 9, Gabriel is coming to give him understanding about the mare, the vision of Daniel 8:14 that he didn't understand. Now also, think about this too. What kind of vision was the mare of Daniel 8:14? Remember, it was a time prophecy unto 2,300 evening and mornings. Time prophecy. What is the next thing that Gabriel says to Daniel after he tells him to understand the mare, the time prophecy of Daniel 8:14? What does he say? He says, and at the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I've come to show ye. Understand the matter and consider the mare, pointing right back to Daniel 8:14. Then what does he say? 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. 70 weeks. What kind of prophecy of that? Of course, it's a time prophecy as well. It's clear. Gabriel has come to give Daniel an explanation for the 2300-day prophecy of Daniel 8:14. Now, folks, there are a lot more links exist, and they're going to be on our website. The point is that the time prophecy of Daniel 8:14 and the time prophecy of Daniel 9:24 through 27 are linked. I mean, please, Adventists aren't the only ones to see this too. In fact, I have in my office an Orthodox Jewish commentary on Daniel. And I was wondering, what do these Orthodox Jews do with the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9:24 through 27? And the fascinating thing is the first thing it does is it links it back to the mare of Daniel 8:14. In other words, they do the exact same thing, linking it as we do. I hope to put that page up on this website. Anyway, from this Orthodox commentary. Anyway, so where are we now? Where are we at this point? We've seen, let's see where we've come so far. We've seen that the judgment of Daniel 7 is the same thing as the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8, and it happens sometimes after 1798, but before the second coming. Then we've seen that the mare of Daniel 8:14, the vision about the cleansing of the sanctuary, was the only part of Daniel 8 not explained. Then in Daniel 9, the next chapter, the same angel that appeared to him in Daniel 8, who told him to explain the vision to him, reappears, and he says he's come to give Daniel skill and understanding. And the last thing Daniel did not understand was the mare, the vision of the 2300 days. Gabriel then specifically says to Daniel to consider the mare, the vision. What mare? Obviously, the mare of Daniel 8:14. So where are we now? We have two time prophecies, right? We've got the 2300 days of Daniel 8:14, and now the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9:24 through 27. Two time prophecies that are clearly linked. Thus, we can see that the explanation comes in Daniel 9. The 70-week prophecy is the explanation for the part of Daniel 8 that wasn't explained, the 2300-day prophecy. So where are we now? We have two time prophecies, the 2,300 days of Daniel 8:14 and the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9:24 through 27. Two time prophecies that are clearly linked. Okay, so look at this. What do we have here? We have two time prophecies here now. The 2,300 days, years, and the 70 weeks are 490 years. Now wait a minute. Daniel 8:14 talked about 2,300 days, evening and mornings. I have up here years. Why do I do that? You know, we talked earlier about the day-year principle and many time prophecies a day equals a year. Well, it needs to be applied here as well. Folks, there are many reasons why, which I don't want to get into now. The website will deal with this topic in much more detail. Though I want to give you two reasons right away, just to help establish you now. First, Daniel 8 comes in symbols. We saw a ram, goat, and a little horn. Okay, they're symbols. They're not to be taken literally. They're realities. They're symbols for other realities. So why take the time prophecy as a literal element as well? We shouldn't. The symbolic nature of the vision itself reveals that the time element is symbolic, not literal as well. Hence, we're dealing with prophetic time. We use the day-year principle as well. Second, and this is important too, the vision itself in Daniel 8 started out with Medo-Persia, many centuries before Christ, and goes through Greece, Rome, pagan and papal, into the future, even from our time, okay? Now, a literal 2,300 days is less than 7 years. Now, think about this. How could the vision, which covers such a long span of history, climax with the time prophecy that covers less than 7 years? It really doesn't make sense. Apply the day-year principle, and suddenly, instead of 7 years, it turns into 2,300 years, a vast span of time that fits so much better the range and scope of the prophecy than does a mere 7 years itself. In fact, it's interesting. One ancient Jewish commentator even translated Daniel 8:14 with the word years, not days, because it was obvious to him that what's meant. It's the same here with the 70 weeks. I have 490 years. Why do I do that? Well, for starters, 70 weeks is 490 days. 7 weeks, 7 days a week, so 70 times 7, it's 490. Thus, with the day-year principle, it becomes 490 years. And please, folks, Adventists are hardly the only ones here to have applied the day-year principle to this prophecy. It has to be applied here as well. In fact, the prophecy makes no sense without it. And let me show you why. And to do this, I want to get into the last time prophecy that we're going to look at. I don't intend to spend much time on the details of this prophecy. We'll have more on the website. Instead, I want to focus on just the points that are important to us here, our immediate concern. And they're just 2 points: the starting date of the 70-week prophecy and to whom it points, okay? It's known as the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9:24 through 27, though I'm going to focus on verse 25 for now. You know, there's plenty of good information on this, and we're going to put more on the website, so don't worry about all the details. But now remember, in Daniel 9:24, he gives him the 70-week prophecy, okay? 70 weeks are determined. Then in the next verse, he gives him more information. What does he say? 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Okay, so what do we got? First, in verse 24, the 70-week prophecy. But what comes next? It gives a time frame that will reach until the Messiah the Prince. The Messiah the Prince? Who is the Messiah the Prince? Of course, Jesus of Nazareth. Again, folks, this is hardly an SDA interpretation, that Christians all through the ages have seen this as Jesus. Now, the Messiah, the Prince Jesus, we know lived in an early part of what we call AD, Latin for the year of our Lord. What Lord is that? Of course, the Lord Jesus. And this is a fact that helps us understand this general time frame here, which is the early decades of what is known as the 1st century AD. So what do we have? We have the Messiah, the Prince Jesus, who lived in the 1st century AD, okay? It's pointing to the Messiah, the Prince. Now, the other thing we want to look at is the time prophecy itself, which, as we can see here, begins with the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, who was Jesus. And it will be from this command and restore Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 weeks. So what do we have? Can you see a problem here? If you take the 69 weeks of the 70-week prophecy literally, while Jesus was alive, Jerusalem was not destroyed, nor was it destroyed any time right before his earthly ministry. Yet, if taken literally, we have to believe that about 1 year and 4 months before the ministry of Jesus, Jerusalem had been in ruins and a command had been given to rebuild it. That makes no sense at all. However, all you have to do, as in the other prophecy, time prophecy in Daniel 7, is apply the day-year principle here. If so, we have two time elements, the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem and Jesus the Messiah. We have them separated by exactly 483 years, 69 of the 70 weeks. You do the math yourself, which, as we'll see quickly, fits history so much better than does the ludicrous notion that only 1 year and 4 months separates the command to rebuild Jerusalem and Jesus the Messiah. Plus, too, as we've seen, the 2300-day prophecy and the 70-week prophecy are closely related. In fact, they're really two parts of the same prophecy. So Gabriel came to Daniel in chapter 9, and after pointing him back to the time prophecy of Daniel 8:14, he then gave him another time prophecy, the 70 weeks. Thus, if the first one, the 2300 days, needed the day-year principle, the only sensible thing is to apply it to the other time prophecy as well. We've got the 2300-year prophecy and the 70 weeks, or the 490-year prophecy. The 2300 days, the 70 weeks, we have in both. First, it says that 70 weeks are determined. That's more the Hebrew. But the literal Hebrew, that's how it's translated. But the literal Hebrew word for determined is really cut off, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Thus, the 70 weeks, as we could see, are cut off. The 70 weeks, or the 490 years, are cut off. Cut off from what? Well, obviously from the larger time prophecy, the 2300 years. Hence, we can see more evidence about how closely related these two prophecies are. The 70 weeks is just a smaller part of the larger 2300-day prophecy. And because the 2300-day needs the day-year principle, the 70 weeks does as well. Plus, think about this too. How can you cut off 490 years from what is only 2300 days, which if taken literally is 6 years and 4 months? You can't. It makes no sense if taken literally. Hence, as long as you see the need for the day-year principle in Daniel 9:24 through 27, which you need to reach Jesus, then you have powerful evidence why you need the day-year principle for the 2300 prophecy as well. Anyway, it says that 70 weeks, or 490 years, are cut off from the 2300-year prophecy. But when does the prophecy begin? Well, we are immediately told. What does it say? Daniel 9:25. Know therefore and understand that from the command going forth to build Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince, there shall be 6 weeks and 62 weeks. From the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 69 weeks. Thus, right off the bat, 69 of the 70 weeks are accounted for. If we apply the day-year principle, as we must, 483 of the 490 years are covered here. Now, the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, Daniel wrote after the ancient city had been destroyed by the Babylons, can be accurately dated to the year 457 BC. That was a date, by the way, that Isaac Newton used for this prophecy. The irony is this is really one of the more solid historical dates we have. It was kind of funny. I once read an article by somebody contesting this date. He gave all the arguments against 457, goes on and on and on. And what does he conclude? He concludes that the date is not 457, but 458. Okay? That's all he could come up with. And if you really get into it, you'll see that it's really only a difference of 6 months. That's it. We'll deal with this question on the website in more detail. But almost in most cases, if you look up this date, you will come to, at worst, 458 instead of 457. But the evidence is really strong for 458. Thus, 457. Thus, this is what we have so far. See what we've got here. Thus, the prophecy states that from the restore and rebuild Jerusalem, 457 BC, unto the Messiah the Prince will be, Jesus, will be 483 years. And as we said, the Messiah the Prince is Jesus. So it's no coincidence then that if you go from 457 BC and add 483 years, you come to 27 AD. You got to remember, allow for the conversion from BC to AD, which adds 1 year. So thus, instead of 26, which you would get if you simply subtracted 457 from 483, the date comes out to 27 AD. And our best records show that John the Baptist baptized Jesus in the Jordan River in 27 AD. That's when Jesus began his ministry. So what do we have? What have we got so far here? We've got 483 of the 490 years, 69 of the 70 weeks, 457 BC to AD 27. The fact that this points to Jesus is more proof of the day-year principle, because again, if we were dealing with literal time, a mere 69 weeks, the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem wouldn't get us anywhere near the known dates of Jesus, which is the 1st century AD. With the day-year principle, that problem is solved. We believe that Jesus was baptized in AD 27. So what do we have here, though? What we have here, though, is 69 of the 70 weeks, or 483 of the 490 years taken. If we come to the full 490 years, this is what we get. We get this. 490 years, 457 BC to 34 AD. The last week, or the last 7 years, will bring you to 34 AD. Now, there are a couple other very important dates in the prophecy, but I don't want to get into here. They're not necessary for us right now. I want to instead to focus really only on the starting date of the 70-week prophecy, because that's all we really need for what we want to do now. The website itself will get into more details about the 70-week prophecy. But as you can see, if you go from 457 BC and add 490 years, remember the 0-year modification, you get AD 34 at the end of the 70-week prophecy. Now, don't miss this crucial point. What is the foundation of this prophecy? The 70-week and the 2300-day prophecy? For again, they're really the same prophecy. Instead of saying, what is the foundation? I should say, who is the foundation? And that is Jesus. The 70-week prophecy rests upon the dates of Jesus. If you want to debate the starting date of the 70-week prophecy, you can't go too far off, because if you did, you would come up with dates that were really not linked to the dates of Jesus. The point is, the life of Jesus gives us the assurance that the basic time frame of the prophecy is correct. That's a good foundation, is it not? Whew. Though there's so much more in this prophecy that could be explored, for our immediate purposes, there are two crucial points. First, the 490-year prophecy is cut off from the larger 2300-day prophecy. Second, the starting point of the 490 years, and hence the 2300 years, which was not given, we were not given a starting point in Daniel 8, is 457 BC. So look what we have here. 490 years, 457 BC to 34 AD, and 2300 years. The 490-year prophecy is cut off from the larger prophecy, the 2300 years of Daniel 8:14. Now, the whole idea of being cut off implies what? That they're two parts of the same thing. As I said, this is really one prophecy, but in two parts. Otherwise, the idea of cutting off makes no sense. You don't cut off 5 meters of a pipe that is not already part of a larger pipe. Thus, when we cut off the 490-year prophecy from the 2300 years, what do we get? You got 2300 minus 457. You come to 1843. I mean, you cut off or subtract, because isn't cutting off the same as subtracting? 457 from 2300, you get 1843. But what about 1844? Again, we're not dealing with the number line. We are dealing with the calendar, so you don't have the 0 year. So you put those numbers on the calendar, regarding them as years, and starting with 457 BC and going 2300 years, what do you get? What do you get? 457 BC, remembering 1 BC, 1 AD, 2300 years, 1844. What do you know? 1844. Now, folks, there were a lot of Bible students just before that time doing pretty much what we have done here who expect something to happen in the mid-1840s. It wasn't just the Millerites. Look at this again. Notice with me a couple of things. First, the time frame 1844, it covers all the empires that we have talked about. As we saw, by the time of this prophecy, Babylon was pretty much out of the picture. The time frame, however, takes us through Medo-Persia, it takes us through Greece, it takes us through Rome, pagan and papal Rome, past the 1798 phase, right up through to where we are to 1844. Covers all of that. So a review of where we have been so far. Okay, we've got Babylon. Okay, we're going to do them all. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan and papal Rome, 1798, the judgment in heaven, which is this cleansing of the sanctuary, 1844, God's eternal kingdom. And remember what we saw earlier? The judgment in Daniel 7 showed that it had to come after 1798 and before the second coming. And what do you know? 1844 fits perfectly. The 2,300 years of Daniel 8:14 reaches to the year 1844, the longest time prophecy in the Bible, a prophecy built on the foundation of Jesus, one that brings us from antiquity, quote, into the modern era. Look at this. At this point, folks, this chart pretty much says it all. Again, look at the parallel, the sequence of kingdoms. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, God's eternal kingdom, that shows that the judgment seen in Daniel 7 and the cleansing of the sanctuary are the same event, and it occurs after 1798, but before God's eternal kingdom. This alone takes you 95% of the way there. You just need Daniel 9 to narrow it down to a specific year. Hence, the beginning of the cleansing of the sanctuary is the year 1844. That's when the judgment begins, so powerfully depicted in Daniel 7 like this. Look at this. And judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. Now, all of this leads really to what I want to talk about now in my remaining time. Okay? First, this judgment, which began in 1844, is made in favor of the saints. Indeed, it's so much in their favor that when it's over, they possess God's eternal kingdom. That is, when this judgment ends, Jesus returns. The world as we know it is gone, and the saints get their kingdom. Okay? We're dealing with the end of the world as we know it and the establishments of God's eternal kingdom. Hey, folks, it doesn't get more important than that, does it? Now, as we saw, don't miss this point, because people miss this. This is a judgment in favor of God's people. Why? Why is it in their favor? Is it because they are perfect, sinless, and without fault? Look at this. Daniel 7:22, judgment in favor of saints, same thing as Daniel 8:14, the sanctuary cleansed. And the answer to why the judgment is in favor of the saint is found in the parallel verse in Daniel 8:14, which teaches the same thing as Daniel 7:22, only it brings in the element of the sanctuary. Daniel 8:14 holds the secret. The judgment is in favor of the saints because of what Daniel 8:14 reveals. The sanctuary is cleansed. The sanctuary itself is a model of the plan of salvation. It's a model of God's grace for sinners, and even for saints, right? I mean, after all, what saint is so holy that he or she doesn't need grace? Thus, right off the bat, the bringing in of the sanctuary brings in the whole concept of grace, of gospel, of the entire plan of salvation. Folks, that's what the sanctuary service was about from beginning to end. It was about what Jesus does to save us. Second, the sanctuary being cleansed is the Day of Atonement. And folks, don't miss this. Atonement is all about one thing and one thing alone, the work of God in saving us. Atonement is about the blood of Christ shed in our behalf. In fact, Leviticus 16, which talks about the Day of Atonement, the word blood appears about 9 times. Blood and sacrifices are central to the whole thing. And all that blood, all that sacrifices, all represent the work of Jesus, his blood, and his sacrifice on our behalf. The judgment is in favor of the saints because it's the same thing as the Day of Atonement. And atonement is about salvation, about the work that Jesus does to save us. Now listen to this crucial text, because it is crucial. This text is crucial. What is the purpose of the Day of Atonement ritual itself? Remember, we believe we're in the Day of Atonement. What is the purpose? What does it say? Leviticus 16:16. Read this text, let it burn in your brain, tattoo it somewhere, learn it. And he shall make, this is talking about the Day of Atonement, and he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanliness of the children of Israel and because of their transgressions and all their sins. Uncleanliness, transgression, sins. What? The saints aren't sinless? They aren't perfect? They aren't flawless? No. And it was precisely because of their uncleanliness, their transgressions, and their sins that the sanctuary had to be cleansed, and atonement made for the people. I mean, talk about the gospel being revealed on the Day of Atonement, the Day of Judgment. And one of the things I couldn't believe, the word translated transgression is peshaim. And if you know Hebrew, that means rebellion. That's one of the strongest words for sins. And yet it is atoned for on the Day of Atonement. They are covered, even the peshaim, even the transgressions, the rebellion. And folks, this is the model for what's happening to us now in the real Day of Atonement. We need the blood just as much as they did. That's why judgment is in favor of the saints. Not because they are sinless, but because of the blood shed in their behalf. Look at this again. Look at the parallel here. Daniel 7:22, judgment in favor of the saints. Same thing as the sanctuary being cleansed. The reason that the judgment is in favor of the saints is revealed in the truth about the sanctuary being cleansed. Judgment is in their favor because of the atoning work of the high priest in their behalf on the Day of Atonement, symbolic of the time that we are living in now. What did we read much earlier? Remember this text? For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or evil. Now let me ask you, what saint is going to be able to stand when every secret thing is brought into judgment? Every secret thing? Who could stand? Who could endure that kind of scrutiny without an intercessor and a substitute? And that's what the sanctuary message, starting with the cross, is all about. It's about what God has done and is doing so that we can be saved even when every secret thing is brought before judgment. Otherwise, how could anyone stand in the judgment and be saved? I think I might have said before, I'm in trouble for what I did in public, not much what I've done in private, every secret thing. Now, look at this text. Now, the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesties in heaven. This is Jesus' high priestly ministry. In the earthly sanctuary model in Leviticus 16, when the sanctuary was cleansed, atonement was made for all the people because of the blood shed in their behalf, blood symbolized by the death of Jesus. This is a once-a-year ritual, the Day of Atonement, and it's the earthly symbol and the earthly type of the judgment depicted in Daniel 8:14, when the heavenly sanctuary is cleansed. And the good news about this judgment is that all through Leviticus 16, atonement was being made for the children of Israel. Atonement is always the work of God in behalf of his people to do for them what they cannot do for themselves, which is save them from their sins. Okay? Listen to this point here. Another point. Although the high priest goes into the most holy place, where the law is stored in the Ark of the Covenant, it's important to remember one crucial point in Leviticus 16. Don't want to push it too far, but it's something worth considering. The law never comes into view. No, the emphasis the whole time is on the blood of the sacrifices. Why? Why? Because is it because the law is voided or bad or none effect? No, of course not. Folks, it's because this is the Day of Atonement. And atonement is not made through the law, but through the blood of the sacrifices. Here is the key to understanding what I said in the beginning of this whole seminar about how to deal with the tension between salvation by faith and judgment by works. And the answer is Daniel 8:14, the cleansing of the sanctuary. See, the pre-Advent judgment shows us basically that when our name comes up in judgment, the blood of Jesus covers us. The pre-Advent judgment gives us assurance of salvation because it shows us that Jesus is our substitute in the judgment, certainly when we need him the most. Okay. See, the judgment is not a time, folks, when God decides to accept or reject us. The judgment is a time when God finalizes our choice whether or not we have accepted or rejected him, a choice made manifest by our works. What does the Bible say? James 2:18, yea, a man say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Now, folks, understand this. Works don't reveal that you kept the law good enough to be justified. Come on, who's going to do that? They reveal only the reality of your faith. Okay, you say fine, but you ask, well, that's fine, but how do I know that I have enough works to reveal the reality of my faith? Well, you know, that's a logical but wrong-headed question. And I think a key or an answer is found in the parable of the publican and the sinner. The question, how do I know that I have enough works to reveal my faith, is really seen in the attitude of the Pharisee, who was pointing to all his works, what he did and not do, as if that is what made him holy before God. Read the parable. It didn't work, did it? He was not justified before God because our works don't cut it, can't cut it. That was his attitude, okay? Instead, our attitude should be that of the publican. And what does the scripture say? And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And according to Jesus, he was the one that left justified. He was the one, not the other one. So what does that teach us? What does that teach us? It teaches, folks, that we must assume right from the start that our works will never be good enough. Which is why we have to, like the publican, reach out in faith and claim God's grace, a grace that is revealed in the sanctuary, especially on the Day of Atonement. Folks, it's atonement. Atonement is what God does to save us. Now, look at this text, for this is a crucial Day of Atonement text as well. This is the flip side, the balance of the whole thing. This is from Leviticus 16:2. Look at this. And this shall be a statute forever unto you in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month. This is dealing with the Day of Atonement. Ye shall afflict your souls. Afflict your souls? Now, folks, whatever that precisely means, and there's some question about that, it means at least an attitude of repentance, of submission, of faith and accepting of God's grace, a grace that we do not deserve, but we claim by faith because we know that regardless of our works, we are unworthy. That was the attitude of the publican. Whatever else he was doing, he was afflicting his soul, showing that he knew his unworthiness and was relying totally on the merits and mercy of God. And that's what God's people are to be like in the Day of Atonement. You know, I would venture to guess, even though the text doesn't say, but if you compare the life of the publican, who wouldn't even lift his face toward heaven, you would find a life probably so much more in harmony of the law of God, a life so much more reflective of the character of Jesus than you would find in the Pharisee, who was busy pointing out his own works. Please, how far the poor man didn't have a clue to what righteousness and salvation was all about. How far from knowing God he must have been, the Pharisee, whereas I think the publican had a revelation and knew something about the righteousness of God, which was why he was in an attitude of repentance. And this is the message of assurance of salvation, even when we are judged by works. Daniel 8:14 shows us that our works, which reveal our faith, also reveal our need of grace, a grace that is specially made manifest to us on the Day of Atonement, through the Day of Atonement ritual. Here is how, as we end this, here is how we can reconcile salvation by faith and judgment by works. Again, who Who, when judged by works, is going to have enough good works to justify them? Who, when judged by the law, is going to have kept the law good enough to justify them? Can't. That's why salvation has to be by grace alone. The grace revealed by the blood shed on the Day of Atonement, when the sanctuary is cleansed. And we will deal much more with this on the website. Hence, I want to close with this, which is the main point of this that I have tried to make in this whole seminar. The key to understanding how we can be judged by works but saved by faith is found in the pre-Advent judgment of Daniel 8:14. It's found in these wonderful and promising words. Vayomer Eli ad erev boker al panim u'shlosh meot v'nitztak kodesh. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Here it is revealed how a people, a repentant people who are afflicting their souls, a people, though guilty of uncleanliness, guilty of transgressions, guilty of sin, are nevertheless justified by faith without the deeds of the law.